The Help by Catherine Stockett. Born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi in 1969, and after graduating from the University of Alabama with a degree in English and creative writing, Catherine Stockett moved to New York City, where she worked in magazine publishing and marketing for 9 years. She currently lives in Atlanta with her husband and her daughter. She is best known for her 2009 debut novel, The Help, which is about African American maids working in white households in Jackson, Mississippi during the 1960s. Set in the early 1960s, The Help follows the lives of 3 women: Abilene Clark, a maid in her 50s who takes care of children as well as housekeeping, lost her son Trelor prematurely in an incident on his job about 3 years prior to this time, and is now raising her 17th white child. Minnie Jackson, Abiline's best friend, also a maid and a great cook, perhaps the best in town. Notwithstanding her great cooking skills, she has already lost about 19 jobs, the last one working for Miss Walters, Hilly Holbrook's mother, and that so badly it earned her quite a reputation around Jackson. This resulted in her not being able to find a job in any other household apart from that of Celia Foote, who, having no relationship with any other of the women in town, knew nothing about her reputation. Eugenia Phelan, aka Skeeter, is a 22-year-old white girl who just returned home after graduating from Ole Miss, and contrary to her mother's wishes, unlike most of her mates, seems to have bigger plans than simply get married and become a stay-at-home mom. Upon returning home with her degree, Skeeter starts making moves to fulfill her desire to become a writer. But seeing all her job applications rejected for lack of experience, and following the advice of Elaine Stein, an editor in New York at Harper & Row, she decides to take a job in a local magazine writing a weekly cleaning advice column. Not knowing the first thing about housekeeping, Skeeter seeks the help of Abilene to write her column. This is the first time the 2 women really interact with each other. What moves Skeeter to start writing a book about the maid's point of view, besides her strong desire to write something more meaningful than a weekly cleaning advice column, is the Home Help Sanitation Initiative, which her friend Hilly Holbrook comes up with, which requires every white household to have a separate bathroom for the colored help. Skeeter starts really noticing the lines between the whites and the colored, and gets interested in the apartheid and the civil rights movement, which causes her to get shunned from her social circle. Having been interacting with her for the Miss Milner column, the first maid Skeeter asks to interview is Abilene, who, as one could imagine, given the time and the high risk that a similar project entailed, at first says no. A sermon in church convinces Abilene to help Skeeter out with her book of interviews, so she begins writing down her stories and reading them to Skeeter for her to write, as she finds this much easier than answering questions. Skeeter needs about a dozen maids for Miss Stein to review her book for publishing. Therefore, after quite some convincing, Abilene gets Minnie to participate in the interviews. The event that convinces the other maids to take part in Skeeter's book is the arrest and sentencing to 4 years in prison of Yule May, who had stolen some worthless ruby ring from Hilly Holbrook. Yule May was Hilly Holbrook's maid. She had asked Hilly for a loan of $75 to complete tuition money for twin boys who had gained admissions to college, but Hilly wouldn't hear of it, saying a good Christian doesn't lend money to a person who is healthy and can work to earn it. There are a few differences between the novel and the movie. The first thing one will notice is that in the novel, Skeeter's mother gets sick towards the end. Meanwhile, in the movie, she is sick from the moment she first appears on screen. As always, the events develop much quicker in the movie than in the book, as the screenwriter must render a good 444 pages of details and suspense and descriptions in 2.5 hours of movie. In a rather humorous way, with this novel, Catherine Stockett clearly and faithfully depicts the delicate themes of apartheid, racism, and employment as an African American in white households back in 1962 in a town like Jackson, Mississippi. The novel focuses on maids during the civil rights movement and brings to light actual events like the assassination of Medgar Evers, an African American activist who worked towards gaining the rights for African Americans at the time, as well as aiding the fight to end segregation. She goes on to create three incredible women, Abilene, Skeeter, and Minnie, whose determination to start a movement forever changes a town and the way other women relate to one another. Through these main characters and others, we can really get a feel of what life must have been like back then. The Help is a timeless and universally relatable story about the boundaries that we abide by, the fear in simple acts that are now the normality, and the walls we break through. I chose The Help because, in my opinion, it is the first novel and movie to depict segregation in a slightly humorous yet serious way. I think it is appreciable the way the author tried to put herself in the shoes of African American house help and write the novel from their perspective as well as hers. Also to be noted, the fact that in the novel, the author not only speaks about segregation and racism, but also hits the delicate topics of alcoholism, domestic violence, miscarriage, betrayal, sickness, and death, all the while managing to maintain the mood light. When I first saw the movie in 2014, I remember wondering why stay-at-home moms would need live-out nannies in the first place. And above all, falling in love with the acting skills of Viola Davis, who plays the role of Abilene in the movie. That being said, in both the movie and the novel, I kind of see what they were going for, but despite the efforts to market them as a progressive story of triumph over racial injustice, The Help still distorts, ignores, and trivializes the experiences of Black domestic workers. There is a somewhat insensitive and generalized portrayal of the African American community, a nearly uniform depiction of Black men as cruel or absent, and a failure to acknowledge the sexual harassment that many Black women endured in their white employers' homes. The Help